Hey everybody, my name's Will Heeman. I'm from the US, specifically from the state of Arkansas, but I've been living in Europe in the country of Poland for about the last 10 years. I adore life in Poland and traveling across the different countries of Europe. But one of the downsides is the fact that I can rarely make it back to the US. So when I found out that my 89-year-old grandmother and my aunt would be traveling together in Florence, Italy, I thought I absolutely have to see if I can crash their party, take advantage of this opportunity to catch up with them. Now, both my grandmother and my aunt are world travelers, and besides that are just very interesting people. So I thought I would sit down with them and see if I could pick their brains about traveling and about their life in the US. So I hope you enjoy some glimpses of Florence and our conversation. I'm not doing anything. Oh, perfect. Yeah. What is it? So, thanks for meeting me here in this garden in Florence, Italy. Can you tell me what your name is, where you're from, and how do we know each other?
Well, my name is Helen Catherine K. Cowan Calcote. I go by the name of Kay, which is short for Catherine. And I understand that, after I had two daughters and they married, one of them married your father.
Okay.
And you were their child, so therefore you were my grandchild.
That's right. Oh, thank you for the reminder. And I don't call you Kay, I call you Mimi.
Mimi, yes, that was what my children called my mother. I don't think she wanted to be called grandmother, certainly not Big Mama.
I can't imagine calling you Big Mama, Mimi.
I would have suggested you change it.
But I do remember there was a point where finding out that you and Pawpaw, you actually were named Kay and David. That was kind of a discovery to me, that you had a different name besides Mimi and Pawpaw. Where are you from? Where would you say you were from?
Oh, Texas, definitely. I was born in the Lone Star State. My family goes back to the Republic of Texas, a 10-year period between 1836 and 1846, when Texas was an independent country. And I think that's just kind of, my dad always says that was, being a daughter of the Republic of Texas was more important than being a daughters of the American Revolution, though I can have claim to both.
It's a fascinating story that you can claim to be a daughter of the Republic of Texas.
Right, and then my family was living there. My granddad was a cattle raiser and drove the cattle up to catch the railroad and be shipped north. And my dad talked about actually having to his father in the 1880s having to sleep in the trees to keep away from the Indians. They would build a fire and then walk some distance away from it.
Oh my goodness.
And sleep in the trees to keep safe. And that was 1880s.
But it was that dangerous. And
yes.
where would they keep the cattle, I wonder?
Well, nearby, but not in the trees.
That is an incredible
Yeah, that was
story.
supposed to be safer in the trees.
Well, you have been interested in history for many years and
Right.
also family history, and I think I love hearing those tidbits about our family history. Are there any other historical tidbits or facts from your family that
Well,
you could
my
share?
grandfather on my mother's side was a doctor, went to Vanderbilt, and I was from Mobile before that. But they had 8 girls, I guess it was 8 girls, and one son who became a doctor. And they were all well educated, and some of them were teachers. One was a librarian. Aunt Mary was an amazing woman. She's the one who took us on tours as I was growing up. She would charter a bus, have paying passengers, and then she would give us a trip free. So she started out with going up the East Coast the same year that I was studying American history in grade school.
Wow.
And
So you
I was
got to see some of the places you were learning
Jamestown
about.
and Williamsburg, and actually I found out recently that the family goes back to the Trapley family in Williamsburg in about 1657, and they owned a store which is still in business today, Trapley's.
So our family goes back that far
to Williamsburg.
in the 1600s.
Yeah, yeah. Came from England and maybe Scotland or Ireland, I don't know. Their name was Simpson. And grandmother's name was Terry. Last name was Terry, and then of course we traced it back to the Tarpleys
So the Tarpleys, that was the first family
that we know of.
Okay.
I'm sure it could be now.
And you've done that genealogical research, right?
I have not done the research myself. I've tuned into it.
Okay. Really interesting. But going back to traveling and Aunt Mary, right?
Yeah.
Who sent you traveling. So that was in the U.S., but also is that what started your love of international traveling, traveling abroad?
We went on the first trip as soon as the war was over in 1946. We went up the East Coast, and we went into Quebec and Montreal and Toronto. I think that was about a 3-week trip. The next year we
So how old were you at that time?
Was I what?
How old were you then?
I was about 11.
Okay.
So, and we were studying it in grade school, the history of the United States. So, every time the teacher would say something about one of the places, I'd say, I've been there, I've been there.
Oh.
I know they got tired of it.
Eventually, though, even past Canada, y'all started traveling through Europe, right? Or is that when
Well, we after we went, we would go northeast, northwest. One trip, I think it was a 3-week trip, up through the middle states and up to Vancouver and Victoria, and then coming down through California and the Southwest, and that was an interesting trip. And then
incredible.
Then the year we went to Cuba, and I believe that was 1949, maybe.
What do you remember from that trip?
Well, the downtown was dirty. They had a big drive called the Malecon. Is that American? I don't know. And I think we went out to some kind of farm where they raised maybe tropical fruit. I don't know, but it was.
But you can say you've been to Cuba,
I have
which
been.
a lot of Americans aren't able to.
I've been to Cuba, BC. That's before
BC.
Castro.
Cuba, BC.
Yeah. And then one time she took us to Mexico City, and we had to change buses at the border and get on Mexican buses. So we went all the way down to Mexico City
neat.
and Acapulco.
Wow.
And, I loved Acapulco. The water of the Pacific is just beautiful.
But those bus trips, I mean, those were long journeys, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How did you pass the time? Was the family just
Well, there was one lady that nobody liked to sit by, but Aunt Mary always put her right behind the driver. And we cousins, there were 4 cousins, would have to take our time sitting by that lady because nobody else would.
Bless your hearts. That's so nice.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
sacrifice. And then, so when my mom and my aunt were growing up, they were going on the continuation of these trips,
Somewhat.
right?
Aunt Mary didn't take them as much.
But the trips that I hear about to Europe, that
Well, Aunt Mary sent us on the trip to Europe. She did not guide. She just paid for it.
but it lasted for that long when you were young, and then
Yeah,
that is
sitting.
incredible.
I remember Sue standing out in St. Mark's Square. She was feeding the pigeons. She had the best time. They were lighting on her shoulder and on her head, and she was feeding the pigeons.
Well, can you remind me what that trip was? So this is a trip that both my mother, Linda, right, and Sue were on, and how many countries did you visit, and how long
Well,
how long of a time period?
we were in England, and then we went south to France. We did not, I don't believe we went to Spain on that trip, but we went to Switzerland, and we went to
Germany, I know.
Germany and Italy.
Wow.
Went to Rome.
So that it's incredible that she would send the family out on these
Yeah.
big excursions. Traveling has always remained an important part of your life, and you've traveled a lot. You traveled a lot with my grandfather, Papa. Y'all traveled together, and you've traveled with friends and other family members. What are some of the travels or the destinations that have stood out and you've really enjoyed?
I loved London. I really did. And of course, the British speak where I can understand them.
That helps.
And we've been, not all with Aunt Mary, but David and I went to Portugal and Spain, and we went over to Morocco. And that was an interesting place, so different. So went to, was it Malcolm Forbes who had a place down there, and went to his house.
You often make scrapbooks, or maybe every time you take a big trip, you've made scrapbooks.
I can't go on any more trips. It's too much trouble making the scrapbook.
But that was so fascinating as a kid, just to see this wall of scrapbooks and it wasn't just trips. It was
Yeah, for the families
years, families, what we had going on, but just cataloged by some in chronological order, some in alphabetical order, perhaps of destination. But for each international trip, you had a whole spread of pictures, but also drink coasters and match booklets and little notes or pamphlets.
Well, sometime I decided it made sense to the descriptions that commercial establishments put out. I would copy them in print or printed, and then I would write my remembrances in script, so you'd know
good.
which was which.
Add just kind of a combination of the guidebook text and your
remembrances. And since then, I've been on several trips with all women. I think that one time we went abroad with 12 or 14 women. Oh my. Each day one of the women was responsible for planning the day, and we were under her supervision. Well, sometimes the ladies didn't always mind the leader. They would drag back. They found a window of interesting clothes to look at, or a place where they might want to stop and get a drink. Or it was hard being the captain for the day.
And that, I believe you're referencing a trip to this city, to Florence, right? So that was when you came as a group of women.
Yeah.
But so Italy was one of your travels, but I mean, Greece, Norway, so many different places. And I remember in 2012 when I was so excited to announce to my family, to you and Papa, that Abby and I were moving abroad to Poland. And I thought, surely out of all the destinations that Mimi, my grandmother, has visited. She hasn't been to
Oh,
Gdansk,
yes,
Poland.
Gdansk.
There's no way. And I made the announcement. Guess what, Mimi? We're moving to Gdansk, Poland. Oh, it's a beautiful city. I've been there. So you had already been there on a cruise, and then came to visit us later,
Yeah,
which was
yeah.
really neat.
Right.
You've been to Poland twice, and
Yeah, that was, I liked the city of Gdansk,
Yeah.
and we stayed in that little hotel.
in Oliva, yeah,
Yeah.
close to our house.
Yeah.
And meant a lot that you and
Yeah.
Mom came to visit us. I am curious, Mimi, are there any childhood memories that stick out to you?
Well, a silly memory is that grandmother had a cellar, but it was built above ground. The concrete wall came up about 6 feet, maybe, from the ground up, and then it went down too. And Joyce and I decided we would clean it one time. That was crazy. It was dirty. That's old canned food, all that. Oh my.
So was that
Yeah.
just an adventure cleaning that?
Yeah. And Joyce was only 3 years older than I, but at 15, she was dating Bud, who was 21. Now, I don't know whether I would have let my 15-year-old daughter go out with a 21-year-old man or not, but at that time, when she was 15, I was 12. And I just didn't fit in her league at all. I wasn't interested in one guy. And we never did get along real well. They promised us a Nancy Drew book if we could get along that Christmas, and we didn't earn it.
You didn't earn the Nancy Drew book.
I don't know what we were fussing about, but we were different. When I was much younger, as an only child, my mother was concerned about my getting along with other kids. I had old maid aunts who catered to me, and they expected a lot of me. But so she had taught first and second grade, and so she opened a nursery school, and that's how I learned to get along with. I had a graduate studies in how to get along with other kids, but she worried so much about those kids that were going barefooted. She didn't want them to go barefooted. So I solved the problem. I put rusty nails out in the backyard with leaves over them to disguise it. I don't think anybody actually stepped on one, but I thought that would teach them a lesson.
What a lesson they wouldn't forget.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
How old were you then?
I was probably 5 or 6. But that was supposed to teach me how to get along with other children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanted to solve that problem.
Yeah, it was. About 12 or 15 kids. And Mother used the money from that to buy her furniture, I think.
Okay, from that.
Yeah. And it was interesting. Dad was a teacher. He taught wood shop. And then during the war, he was born in 1898, and so going in, they wouldn't take him into the army when in his 40s. So he changed to working at one of the refineries. He felt like that was aiding the war effort, and then he decided after the war to open a hardware store, and it was hard to get things then. There was a list of 60 people who were waiting to get an iron.
Wow.
Yeah.
At his store.
Yeah. And he opened the store with rat traps and what else was there? And back then they sold nails by the pound.
And did you help out in the store at all?
Yeah, I did. And I had a gift shop there one time. About the time I was dating David, though, and I was not too interested in the gift shop. My mother was always a Methodist and my dad was always a Baptist. Dad was a very involved person. When I was very young, he used to help out at the Mexican Mission. You've heard me talk about that. And I had my own little special friend, Margarita Martinez, and I learned to sing songs in Spanish. And that was certainly a good experience for me.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I learned to appreciate another culture, and and I could sing in la cruz, do primera vila luz, Ellis Manchester me amo, yo la ve, allí par faith. That's all I remember.
That's incredible you remember it.
Oh dear, I tried to, and then I studied Spanish in grade school and college, and I still pronounce things fairly reasonably, but I don't remember many words.
But you have traveled to Spanish-speaking destinations and occasionally use some
yeah.
Spanish here
Gracias,
and there.
gracias, señor.
Exactly. So you'll have to find Margarita Martinez and see if she can practice with you.
Yeah, right.
Well, thank you for telling me some about your history and sharing a little bit about your travels.
Okay.
And I'm so glad that you let me come see you and Aunt Sue in Florence, Italy. So cool.
Thank you, and it's been nice being with you in Florence, Italy.
Yeah, so Aunt Sue, we have had the opportunity in Florence to catch up over some Aperol Spritz and wine and beer in dimly lit bars in Florence. And you've told me a little bit about where you've been in recent years, and I just am so impressed by the adventurous trips you take. Can you mention some of the trips that you've taken, international trips or not, that have stood out to you?
The longest adventure was when Mark and I, Lachlan and his dad, left
My
Boston.
cousins.
Boston in April and traveled across the country for 3 months in a old white Toyota van. It didn't have a name then. It wasn't called the Toyota Sierra or anything. It was just a van. And
The Toyota van.
yeah, it was just a van. Yeah, and it was very you don't see them anymore.
And was that thing stickered up? Do I remember that well? Okay,
Everywhere we went, Mark wanted a sticker to put on the back.
Because you asked if I remember that car yesterday, and I had to jog my memory, and I thought, I think it was covered with stickers on the back.
It was not when we left.
Okay.
So those are all from the trip. Yeah.
So 3 months. And how old
More,
were
almost like 3.5 months.
3.5 months. And that was with both Lachlan and Una?
No, before kids.
Oh, before kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I was 31 or 2, and Mark would have been 39.
The adventure of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Where did you sleep in the van, I guess?
Well, we had a tent and sleeping bags, so if we weren't too tired, we set up a tent, and we had a book called Campgrounds for $5 or Less, and that's where we headed to. And we didn't want to get on an interstate, so it was all back roads.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
And that worked out? I mean, that book was reliable? You could count on the fact that the campsite was there?
Yeah. It was always, sometimes it was accurate with what the amenities were. So sometimes just a campground, usually Bureau of Land Management was what they were. So it just had a fire ring and maybe a picnic table.
What a way to travel.
No restrooms, or maybe just an outhouse or one of those porta potty things, that they come in empty every now and then.
Wow. And how did you cook? What were you just shopping on the way?
Yeah, we would stop
at
and
grocery stores.
Pick up so we had an ice chest that was probably 1.5 feet deep, 2 feet wide, and that stored enough ice and food for 3 days. And we needed water. Not all of the campgrounds had potable water, so we made sure we had enough water.
Stock up on water.
Mm-hmm. And we have the 2 dogs, Tina and Cody.
Oh yeah.
Yep, German Shepherd and a Airedale Terrier. So they went with us.
I remember them.
Yeah.
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 So I mean, what true odyssey that must have been. 3 months and across the U.S. Where
Yeah.
do you remember any specific episodes that stand out from that trip or
Yes.
Yeah.
So before we left, my van had been parked in front of my house in Somerville, Massachusetts, on a hill, and Bobby, who was my ex-husband, first ex-husband, had borrowed it, and he had accidentally kind of taken a left in front of another driver, and that driver followed him, and he parked it in front of my house and was going to then go to his own house, and they came by and threw a brick at the windshield after he got out.
Oh, God.
And from that moment on, anytime it rained, water would drip down the roof of the van and drip inside the car.
No.
And it dripped all the way on the inside of the windshield into the fuse box. So, where was it? I think it was in Yosemite that the lights went out. Like the running lights, the headlights, everything. So all we could do was travel in the daytime. We
Oh, my
couldn't drive at
goodness.
night. So we always had to get back to the campground. There was one time we went out drinking, and this was in Washington State, and we stayed too long. It was
And you
dark,
had
and we're
to
driving on
with-
a deserted camp road, miles, and Tina and Cody were with
Holy-
us, and Tina's looking ahead and like, brr, starts growling. We're like, what is
What do you
that?
see?
There was a herd of deer running in the road ahead of us, and that's what they had.
Oh, my
And we're going
God.
20.
Okay.
It's not
Yeah.
scary. But
But she saw that when y'all
we
hadn't
couldn't-
yet.
Oh, it was pitch black.
That is incredible.
And then the lights would work if we went around a corner.
So were you just swerving the whole time? Just,
No, it had to be a hard corner. So we finally fixed that after the trip.
after the trip, you made it back
We made it back. So our
in the
first
daytime.
family that we saw was your family. We drove to Arkansas, and your dad. We were trying to make it before dark, but your dad had to meet us at an exit, and we followed him home with like a foot between us and his car.
Wow.
Because we didn't have headlights. It was dangerous. We didn't want to get pulled over by the cops for driving without headlights.
Oh, my-
So he came and met us, and it was like a 15-minute drive.
I was going to ask how
yeah.
far away.
Yeah,
so
not that
15
far, and maybe not
When
even.
it comes to recent travels, what have been the adventurous ones? And I'm kind of thinking Colombia, maybe, and how
Peru.
and Peru.
Yeah, so Peru was the first trip to South America that I'd ever done, and Lachlan had ever done.
So
It was a gift to Lachlan for graduating college. That I told both
What an
kids,
incredible-
do you want a thing or you want an experience?
So you've
I'll-
traveled with both of them in that way.
Yes. Yeah.
To South America.
Yep.
And
yeah.
to these incredible destinations, and in a big way, not
Yeah.
just going to cities, but fitting in hiking, spending a lot of time outside.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not a lot. It was both trips, maybe 1 to 2 days of, outdoors type stuff, because Peru was Lima, and there was urban hiking. Lachlan and I walked so many places, just looking and exploring, and the food was incredible there. But we did go to some ancient ruins outside of the city, so that was fun.
Very neat. And Colombia, where were you and Una going when you had to, and what is the name of that type of transport?
Yeah. So we stayed in Finlandia, Colombia, which is a very small, safe, little family-oriented town, and has not been discovered by tourists at that point. And we went to the sister town of Finlandia called Salento, where you hike this beautiful hike and see the tallest, a certain type of palm tree in the world. I don't think it's the tallest of all the palm trees, but between towns there, you just take what's called a willy, and it's an army jeep. It's like the American word for it, and they have adopted that somehow.
How do you hail a willy?
It's in the town square, and they're parked, and it'll say which town it's going to. Or, so Una and I, there was a restaurant that we wanted to go to, and I done research, and a restaurant that was owned by a grandfather and his grandson, and they cooked traditional Colombian food, and you could bike there and rent bikes in our little town. So we did that. The bikes were like in such bad shape, but we did it. And we get there and the gates closed. They didn't answer. I, messaged them on WhatsApp and everything, and asked the townspeople, like, they don't speak English. We didn't speak Spanish. And they ended up calling, and the grandfather had had some kind of medical issue. So
so they had a reason for not.
Yeah. But we took the Willie back to town instead of biking. But it was so cool biking. We were going along this dirt road, farmland everywhere, and two little kids were like at the end of their driveway. It's a farmhouse, so kind of a long road to the house. But they see us and they're barefoot, and then they start racing us.
Oh, how
and
cool.
They were like 5 and 7, and they're just laughing and yelling to each other, and they're running and talking to us. And
that sounds so fun.
You're biking, so you can't film it, but I have it in my brain. Yeah.
That's the kind of experience that I would like to,
so cool.
do something like that.
Yeah. But when we took the Willie to Salento and stayed there, we did the hiking. And to get to the hiking place, you have to take a Willie from the town. And on the way back, so there's the driver, there's 2 people can fit up front. That was full. And then bench seats in the back, and they were all full.
So it's not just you two. A Willie isn't just for, it's not a private Willie. It's a...
Right. Oh, and backtrack, with the bikes getting back into Finlandia, we're driving back, and somebody would just step from their front porch out to the road, and they would stop and pick them up. Like, there's no bus stop, you just hail it down.
You just wait for the free Willie, and then it'll come.
I think they pay for it, and it was so cool because we were in the front, and there's this lady. She gets in, sits on the bench seat in the back, and then 2 more guys get in, and they start talking, and then there's an old man that gets in and sits on the bench, and they're just talking and laughing, and then another person, and some more laughter, and they were just so happy. And I'm like, maybe they were laughing at us, but it was just lovely. It was
neat.
Lovely.
Such a cool thing to see and experience.
Right, I liked that. But the after hiking, so you would see Willies with people in the front and jam packed in the bench seats, and some people had to ride standing on the back bumper of the Willie, holding onto the luggage rack on top, and I was just dying
intense.
To do that.
You wanted to stand on the back.
Yeah. And so there was one person standing, and 3 people were trying to catch that Willie, and he was like, no, too many people. And I'm like, pew, I put us up there, and so Una and I got to ride. It was probably a good 20 miles.
But in the end, you did get on the back?
Yeah, on the back.
20 dirt
Yeah.
And at the end of that experience, were you thinking, okay, this is enough?
No,
you wanted more.
It was, and he was driving fast around curves, so Una, my legs were almost flying off. It was hilarious. And Una's just cracking up. She goes, "It has been so long since I had that much pure joy."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is so... Yeah. That is it. That's so cool.
And he would brake, and so, the opening to the back, from here to here, that's where people's faces are. Yes. So we lurch forward like
towards everybody.
And at one point we had to stop because some farmer was herding his cows across the road.
But there weren't any sudden, or there probably were a lot. Oh yeah.
But behind us, there was a guy and a girl on a motorcycle. There are motorcycles everywhere in Colombia. And I turn around, and they're both just beautiful people. And I didn't want to take a picture without asking. So I'm like, can I take the picture? And he's like,
yeah.
I don't know. He just did some kind of, heavy metal kind of move. And she's just
and
like,
she got up in there.
she smiled, and it was just cute.
That's
really
so
fun.
cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were curious about y'all and just
everybody was so nice, and they're very proud people. You can tell just by the way they present themselves and talk to you, and they are elegantly helpful. They're just elegant with their confidence, and they don't bend over backwards. It's like it's just what's done, and they're proud of it, and they're, I don't know, they just are beautiful people and happy. There was so much happiness. I missed it. It was the first place I left that immediately I was just missing it.
And even more so than Peru or something like that, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's...
Yeah, usually you're like, I can't wait to get home, And I was
But in
like on the
Colombia,
plane, I'm like, just miss Colombia.
I
miss the guy who looked like Adam Driver. The Colombian Adam
Yeah.
Driver guy. He was so nice. We saw him just about every day, and we waved to him. He had waited on us, and we knew the guys on the corner, these two older men who owned a bakery, and they always stopped us, and we want to talk to you. Teach us how to say, see you later, and they're like later, later. And they were just adorable. We saw them every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and got to know people in the area, And the guy in the square I told you about, the older man, people just go to the town square. It's a very square town on top of a hill. And he would buy a bag of wrapped candy, hard candy, and hand it out to everybody that was sitting in the square.
Just one of the many characters out there, just making that town beautiful. And I love it.
Yeah, it was just special, very special place. Magical. I mean, they call Colombia magical, and it is so true. It's just really true.
I dream of experiencing that someday.
You should.
So this is a very random question and doesn't really fit in with the topic of travel or anything, but going back to your experiences when I was a kid, and even before that perhaps, you were playing rugby in the mid or late 80s, early 90s?
1987 to 1995. No. 94, something like that. 93, 94, something like that.
So can you give us just a little slice of what that was like, that experience of where were you, what state, and what was going on?
Okay, started playing rugby in 1987. Played for a team in Boston. First team was called Bay State, and that team folded, but then joined Beantown, which was the oldest team in the United States. And we had an excellent coach, Kevin O'Brien. He was Welsh. He had gone to rugby coaching school in Wales.
Such a thing?
Yeah. Rugby is king in Wales. So, we did well. We had good people moved to Boston to play for Beantown. So we had good players and we had a good coach. So when we won nationals, so #1 in the nation in 1991, that was the 5th time that Beantown had won nationals. Yeah, so
incredible.
National champs is as high as you go, and no one knows. You're checking out at the grocery store and you're like, I am not, I'm like the Celtics, but in a different sport. I don't know. It just feels really special to experience that because you work so hard.
And what was the work like, and how did you balance that with making money or having a place to live, a personal life?
It was work and rugby, basically.
Working and rugby.
Yeah. It was practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then weekends were basically either a tournament, which was Saturday and Sunday, or Saturdays, and we had 2 seasons, fall and spring. So the summers, there was a personal life and a break in the winter because you couldn't play rugby in Boston in the winter. So, but we flew to California, we flew to New Orleans, we flew to Atlanta every year, drove to Philadelphia, drove to New York, all over New England, Minneapolis every year because one of our team members moved from Minneapolis, so she always, could organize a game, and you
Oh,
always
neat.
stayed with the other team at their house.
Really?
Yeah, they hosted you.
Oh,
yeah.
neat.
So you didn't have to pay for a hotel.
Wow.
Yeah, so anytime we had people, we hosted teams, you know, they said, okay, who can take 2 people, who can take 3, you know, what can you do? And you got to drive them around and feed them and get to know them. Yeah.
Do you think that, because my father, you know, swears by rugby and played rugby
Yeah.
in Baton Rouge, do you think it was the same kind of culture there, that camaraderie, that when it comes to the hosting and stuff, or was that a specific to women's rugby, or?
I think it's less so in men's rugby, but still, that's the intent. Yeah,
Okay.
the hosting.
Or even to kind of get to know other
Yeah.
rival teams? Or-
Yeah, there's always the drink up after the game, and you sing songs together and you drink together, and the host team, you know, all the beer's free because they buy a keg and they feed you, and yeah, so that's the point of getting together, is getting to know each other, and I love that.
What an incredible
Yeah.
history just
Yeah.
to have and to be a part of, and to
Yeah.
be the champions.
And I'm still friends with players that I played with and players that I played against.
Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.